Hello everybody, I'm Kate Cass, and welcome to an edition of Let's Talk About, and welcome to the latest installment of To Infinity War and Beyond. As we kick off Phase 5, it's time to take a look and see if it started with a bang or a whimper with the biggest adventure from Marvel's smallest superheroes, Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania. While Scott kicks back and enjoys the perks of being a recognized Avenger and beloved hero, he's forced back into action suddenly when he, his daughter Cassie, and the Pym family are all transported to the deepest layers of the quantum realm. While they discover a full microscopic civilization, they also see it's on the brink of destruction by an exiled conqueror. Together they must find a way back home while fighting the biggest threat in any universe. Alright, Phase 5, here we are. Starting off with an installment that I remember a good amount of hype for. With some further exploration of the quantum realm and the promise of the proper introduction of Kang the Conqueror into the MCU, this might have been the most anticipation I'd seen for an Ant-Man movie. Which is why it's such a shame that when the movie finally came out, the reaction basically boiled down to, Seriously, even with a very divisive response to the majority of Phase 4, I don't think I've seen an MCU movie with reception this rough, this quickly. It even knocked Eternals off the pedestal of the MCU movie with the worst Rotten Tomatoes score. Boy, that didn't take long. That's concerning. But did it really deserve that reaction, or are people just being too harsh on a post-Endgame movie again? Well, let's take a closer look. Probably the best thing to talk about first is how Scott is doing post-Endgame, and it turns out, he's doing pretty well, riding the high of his newfound fame while soaking in all the good fortune he has now. He does let it go to his head a bit, and I could see some people finding this development annoying, but honestly, I thought it was a nice change of pace. After seeing so many of our heroes deal with grief and trauma and regret after the battles with Thanos, it's kind of refreshing to see someone just doing okay. And why wouldn't he be? Scott only gained from the events of Endgame. He got all of his loved ones back, they're settling back into everyday life just fine, and people admire him for once. We haven't seen many heroes let being a public hero give them an ego boost. The closest I can think of is Tony, but Tony was used to glory and fame. Scott isn't. He's used to being discarded by society for being a con and a failure. Even superheroing got him in trouble with the FBI, so of course some admiration is gonna make him go overboard and indulge in it. The book deal was especially funny to me, and it was even funnier that Disney and Marvel actually published the damn thing. I haven't had the chance to read it yet though. If you have, let me know if it's worth picking up. The only thing Scott lost due to Thanos is time, which is the one thing that really gets to him. He really starts to feel how disconnected he's become from Cassie, now played by Catherine Newton. Oh, the girl from Detective Pikachu. That's pretty cool. Who went from the fun-loving little girl in need of rescue to a persistent young adult. She's become more independent out of necessity since her dad was gone and her mom appears to be pretty distant since she's not even in this movie, and more outspoken, trying to right wrongs as best she can, but on a more social level. Small side note, I really appreciate that the housing crisis brought up in Falcon and the Winter Soldier is mentioned again here. World building consistency, I appreciate that. Cassie's definitely got a bit of that rebellious teen who won't listen to her dad trope going on in this movie, but what makes it not insufferable is that it has a good, virtuous root to it. She wants to do good, and take advantage of the resources she has to do so. Proven even more when it's revealed she has a suit of her own now. And I do love how Scott doesn't necessarily approve, but can't help but give her some pointers. That's a recurring element in this movie in general. Family members dealing with the distance between them. You not only feel the distance between Scott and Cassie, but also between Janet and Hope. They still love each other, but after how much time they spend apart, they're having trouble trusting each other since they don't really know each other anymore. Both these conflicts are exacerbated when everyone gets sucked into the quantum realm, and here's where things get kinda rough. The only major disappointment to me in this movie is the reintroduction of the quantum realm. What was presented at first as this dangerous, surreal, uninhabitable subspace home to only the most microscopic of organisms now feels more like an alien planet or something. No one needs special equipment to walk around here, the inhabitants are mostly just people. There's bars, for crying out loud. I know they give an explanation for why the quantum realm is much more different this time, and it's fine, but it still feels off as it's such a contrast from what we've seen before, which is a real shame because the movie piqued my curiosity almost immediately with the opening scene that takes place in a more barren, savage area of the quantum realm. It's a good glimpse into Janet's time here, it's really effective. There are some pretty unique creatures here, but I don't know, it feels like the entire place lost a certain otherness that made it such a special part of the Ant-Man lore. It was a letdown to me. That said, there are still some cool parts about it. There is some surrealness to this place, like in the probability storm, and there are some amusing moments of Scott being absolutely weirded out and Hank constantly geeking out about the life that lives here. And as much as I don't like that a lot of the denizens are just human-like beings, there were some standout characters. William Jackson Harper as an exhausted telepath is going to become one of the most underrated characters in the MCU, and Bill Murray makes an appearance and then is promptly killed. Because I can't imagine he was willing to do this for more than a weekend. I saw a lot of people complaining about the visual effects, and while it is the most effects-heavy Ant-Man movie yet, I thought it looked fine, especially for a movie that was like 90% shot in front of a green screen. However, even though I am much more forgiving of VFX than most, there was something that felt off about Quantumania. I mostly felt this during the action scenes, but couldn't quite figure out why. But then Nando V Movies pointed something out in his vlog for the movie, and suddenly it clicked.
I don't know whose idea it was to take a character whose costume is red and black, and a character whose costume is purple and black, and a character whose costume is yellow and black, and put them in a setting that is mostly purple and red and black.
That's what the problem is. The characters we know don't stand out enough among the citizens of the quantum realm or the quantum realm itself. They should feel like complete and total outsiders, and while they are treated like and act like outsiders, there's not enough visual contrast with the environment and its denizens to really get that feeling. Because of that, it gets tough to follow our heroes during busy action sequences. It's muddy and confusing, and perhaps the movie's biggest shortcoming. One thing that doesn't change from the prologue, though, is that the best part of the quantum realm is Janet. Janet might be the best part of this movie in general. As much as I'm disappointed by how the threats in the quantum realm are more typical this time, it's still a dangerous environment, but it's one where Janet thrives. Seeing her so in tune with the strange customs of this place is the kind of thing I really wanted to see if Janet ever got more screen time. But that doesn't mean it's a place she doesn't fear. When they first arrive, she takes charge in protecting Hank and Hope, but is trembling through the entire first scene. Michelle Pfeiffer sells this magnificently. This is clearly a traumatic situation for her, but she's clever and determined enough to get herself through whatever dangers they may cross. It offers some more insight into Janet's 30-year history apart from her family, and how it could affect what's currently going on. I do remember people being critical of how secretive and detached Janet was being from her family, especially when it came to the implication that Janet wasn't necessarily faithful while she was in the quantum realm. But honestly, if you're trapped in another dimension where everything wants to kill you and you have no hope of seeing anyone you love ever again, I don't know how much the sanctity of marriage still applies. Besides, she always kept her family on her mind, mentioning them to her allies down here constantly. After how long they've been apart and under the circumstances they were, of course there's going to be difficulties between them, but it's clear that they all love each other, and any fears Janet might have had of not being accepted by her family are proven to not be the case. And the only thing causing that divide was shutting herself off. It's a bit cliche when breaking it all down, but I found it to be the most compelling thing about the movie. The only downside is that it doesn't offer much development for Hope. She's clearly hurt by how distant her mother is being, but they get past it pretty easily. Most of it goes over Janet's side of things, not Hope's. And you could argue that Hope worked out her resentment towards her parents in the first movie, but I would have liked to have had a more difficult conversation now that Janet is back and Hope is an adult. Hope is easily done the dirtiest in this movie. While she provides some good support and this movie puts her in a good and happy place, it's a real shame she doesn't really get any kind of arc of her own. For a movie called Ant-Man and the Wasp, it feels like the Wasp is just there. But it does offer the chance for some great moments with Hank. Hank might be my other favorite part about this movie. He just seems so much happier with Janet back. He's got her back no matter what. He's got this great relationship with Cassie going on, encouraging her curiosity, which is delightful. He's constantly getting distracted by the wonders of the quantum realm and goes on tangents about how great ants are. I loved it. Although, does it bother anyone else that he doesn't wear his glasses anymore? I miss the nerdy look. I just see Michael Douglas without them. Now, as much as I would love to just talk about Kang when talking about the villain, villains, there's someone else we need to talk about first. The MCU debut of MODOK, played by, we'll get to that. This is one people were pretty excited for, and it starts off well. The mask is pretty darn creepy, and he's immediately out to slaughter and capture. But then the mask comes off, and that's when everyone got mad.
Incoming message from the big giant head!
Yeah, it's Darren Cross. Gotta admit, that is not a returning character I was expecting. Now, before I continue, let me make something perfectly clear. I don't like MODOK. Like, in general. Whatever comic or TV shows I've seen him in, he's weird and creeps me out, and I don't find him particularly interesting. I was so concerned when they said they were bringing MODOK to the MCU because I felt like that no matter what you did, it was gonna look ridiculous in live action. Newcomers were gonna be confused, and fans were gonna be disappointed. And weirdly enough, that's kind of exactly what happened, but I don't mind the choice they made here. I completely understand if you do. If you have a picture in your mind of how they could have integrated MODOK into the MCU, and then they made him Darren Cross doing his best Mr. Electric impression, I sympathize if you were disappointed or it ruined the movie for you. But you're not gonna get a rant about it in this video from me because I don't care about MODOK to begin with. I just wanted to make that clear. Does it look weird and off-putting? Yeah. But that's kind of always how MODOK looked to me, so, you know, it's fine. Maybe they could have warped his face a bit, like it was compressed by his folding in on himself as he warped to the quantum realm. There were ways to do it besides what they did, but it's not necessarily bad. It is kind of a fun callback, and Corey Stoll is definitely making the most of it. For me, it was kind of fun that they leaned into the ridiculousness. Like, they knew that even by comic book standards, no one was going to be able to take this seriously. And they roll with that. Even his death scene is hilarious and just how bizarre and awkward it is. Alright, now we can talk about the real villain of this movie. The man who created MODOK, Kang. I truly hope audiences who aren't plugged into every leak, interview, and announcement that comes from Marvel Studios were surprised by this return, because looking at it in just the context of the MCU, it is a big surprise. The warning set up in Loki is coming to pass. There are other versions of this person capable of destroying universes, and he's warped into a realm that can affect the one we know on an atomic level. Well, to be more specific, he was exiled, for all that planet-conquering stuff, and dropped right into Janet's lap several years after she's been trapped in this realm herself. It is pretty cool to get a proper introduction to Kang the Conqueror, a triumph design-wise transitioning the comic book to live action, and he carries an air to him of all-knowing but not all-telling. Even stripped of his ability to time travel, he still has more power than anyone here and can flaunt it with barely a muscle twitched. Once again, Janet offers the most interesting and dramatic moment in the movie, and learning just what exactly her connection to Kang is tragic. Janet found a kindred spirit in Kang, someone else brilliant, aspirational, and alone. So they work to find their way together. But it's Janet's contributions that lead to him getting enough of his power back to conquer the quantum realm.
He took his prison and made it his empire.
And he did that because what else is he gonna do? Kang is definitely a curse with knowledge type of character. He sees his conquest as a just crusade. The only way to prepare the multiverse for his variants is to assert control for himself. He's got quite the god complex going on, is what I'm saying, believing his wrongs, his losses, and his views are more important than any other living being, just because he knows of the existence of the multiverse where most don't. This does set up a lot of intriguing possibilities by the time Kang Dynasty comes around, if those plans haven't gone off the tracks due to certain complications behind the scenes. Come on, Marvel, just recast Kang. You've done this before with major characters, it's not that hard. So eventually, Kang recruits Scott to retrieve something for him. Yes, he hires him for a heist, essentially. I can't believe we don't get a heist in an Ant-Man movie until like an hour in. And it's a heist in the loosest sense of the word. Scott's not stealing anything from anyone. The only thing preventing him from getting the item in question is some trippy quantum realm side effects. Well, I do think some characters got less focus than others, and I don't love that our two superhero families spend most of the movie separated. There are moments of authenticity, sincerity, and full circleness that make the journey worth it in the end. As much as the action scenes could have been composed better, it does feel nice to see the whole Ant family this time charge into the fight. They work well together, they take advantage of their unique powers, not the best action scene in this trilogy, but still has merit on a sentimental level. The best part though is Scott Hope, and Hank charging into battle against Kang the Conqueror with an army of highly advanced, time-distorted super ants. Regardless of how you feel about it, if you ask me, this whole movie was worth it to watch Hank Pym stare down Kang the Conqueror as his forces are obliterated by thousands of giant ants. It takes all those scoff remarks about how silly Ant-Man's powers are and goes, yeah, I can talk to ants, and I'm telling them to quench their thirst for blood.
I have an army. We have a lot of ants.
Then you have Cassie's journey as a budding superhero. She's a competent fighter, but is still rusty. She knows to get reinforcements, but doesn't know what to do with them once she has them. It's the same thing I liked about Kate Bishop. She's got the potential, but not the experience. The important thing, though, is that she knows not to underestimate people. That anyone can fight back if they face it and try. If someone is down on their luck as Scott can become an Avenger, then there's always a chance to make things better. It shows that while she's still a kid, she's growing up. She even gets a chance to fight against Darren, showing how much he's grown from the scared little girl who he once held hostage. She's even more mature than him now, offering some words of wisdom we should all remember.
It's never too late to stop being a dick.
Cassie also influences Scott to act like a hero again. Scott's been so caught up in reaping the rewards as an Avenger that he's not committing anymore to helping people and righting wrongs. But seeing Cassie be so brave and resolute in protecting these people they don't know just because they need help shows him why standing up for those who have been beaten down and defeated is important. This is given a physical obstacle in the probability storm. After all, this is not the first time he's been trapped in the quantum realm on such a subatomic level, but the thing that helps him make it out is a thing that always has: getting back to Cassie. Out of all the possibilities, that is what he'll put above everything else and fight for the hardest. Come to think of it, Scott and Janet actually share a lot of similarities in that respect. They're the only two who have been trapped in the quantum realm for any length of time, so they each have a connection to it. They're each parents whose superhero work affected their kids, and the parallels continue when it comes to confronting Kang. We found out that Janet sacrificed going back home to Hope to keep Kang here, once again choosing her duties as the Wasp over getting to raise her daughter. And the final fight sees Kang putting Scott in the same position. Let him leave or strand them both. And while Scott makes the same decision, luckily there are people around him who aren't ready to let him go that easily. Despite a lot of the shortcomings of this film, and there are quite a few, there are some good thematic moments like that. Now everything's back to being okay, and I'm sure these events won't have any long-term repercussions whatsoever. Overall, Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania is kind of a mess. To answer my own question from earlier, I do think the criticism was a bit overblown, since by blockbuster movie standards this is still pretty fine, but it's definitely on the lower end of the Marvel Cinematic Universe installments. I could easily put it in my bottom 5. Where I'd pin a lot of the blame on this movie's failures is trying to make the Ant-Man franchise bigger than it needs to be. What I always thought worked about these movies is that they weren't as grand and fast-paced as some of the other franchises. They were low-level heist movies with simple family conflicts and superhero elements to make it more unique, and a hero with unconventional powers, to say the least. But the attempt to go to this whole new realm resulted in a lot of the series' simplistic charm getting lost, being replaced with something that wasn't nearly as endearing. But like I've said throughout this whole thing, it's not without merit. Most Marvel movies aren't. I do think the villains work just fine, yes, even MODOK. I like this angle they took of how Scott and the others are doing in a post-Endgame world. The performances are still great, and there are some really funny moments. Especially with Hank. God, I love Hank in this movie. After how poorly this movie was received in a franchise that was already not a crowd pleaser, I get the feeling Ant-Man isn't gonna pull a Thor and break the trilogy tradition. But I do hope we get to see Scott, Cassie, and the Pym family again. I think the MCU has done a great job making one of Marvel's silliest heroes feel genuine and heroic, and despite how it stumbled, this is no exception. Plus, I want to make sure Scott's okay, because that last scene gave off post-Avengers Iron Man levels of paranoia and trauma, and we might want to check in on him. Besides, this isn't the first time an MCU phase had a rocky start. Phase 2 started with Iron Man 3 and Thor the Dark World, for crying out loud. So I don't think this was a sign of things to come. It could be, but this was just a small part of the MCU. We'll see how the rest of it goes. Thanks for watching, everyone. Definitely let me know what you thought of this movie in the comments below. That's why the series is called Let's Talk About. I want to give a very special thanks to my patrons who help support my content, including Chelsea Crandall, David L. Sproul, Jinx Productions, and Wait in the Wings. If you'd like to join these fine people in supporting my content while getting cool exclusive perks, you can check out my Patreon page at the link in the description, as well as my other social media if you'd like to check out any of those. Thank you so much again for watching, and I will see you guys next time.
ants.